this is our take on astrology. This is how we have engaged the knowledge of astrology to support ourselves in growing, in learning, and learning more about ourselves, in being able to relate to really challenging circumstances that are going on in the world, and stay in a creative space. And this is our take on it. And it's easy to get bogged down in pedagogy and schools of thought. We talked about this episode earlier on in the season with Sarah of how astrology can be used for gatekeeping. And, you know, if you're someone who listens to a podcast about astrology and it doesn't, you know, hit what you've learned or hit what you've been taught or whatever, and we're off the mark, thank you for your corrections. We really appreciate them. And this is how we experience our charts.
They don't need to get different makeup and different outfits every time.
No,
we're not drag race drag queens.
No, we're not. Drag race drag queens don't even do that. They don't. They show up in the same stuff, gig to gig to gig. All right. I mean, it might be a $10,000 outfit that they're showing up in. But I read a really great article in one of the LGBTQ online magazines about the actual cost of getting onto RuPaul, and that it's gotten insane. There's not an expectation, but you know, these queens are spending a whole bunch of money. And one of the things that the writer was remarking on is that the queens who tend to win don't spend that much.
Right.
So just because you spend money doesn't mean that.
That's actually good to hear, because in the real drag world, money difference is different from 4,000 to like 12,000, 15,000.
Yeah,
versus
it's a huge jump.
I can do a couple hundred to I can do over 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and I feel like, especially in traditional pageantry, it's kind of a classist thing. It speaks more into a queen's ability to network and to resource from other people, not just spend her own money on looks.
Yep.
So you can't do it alone.
No, not when you're competing.
No.
And I don't know if we're competing. What are we competing with?
With ourselves.
You don't need to spend money for that.
No, we don't. Are you kidding?
All right, before I gaslight myself to absolve Mitze over here from the responsibility of gaslighting me, welcome everybody to AstroDivaz with Peterbilt and Stone. I'm Nikki Stone.
And I'm Mitze Peterbilt, and I really enjoy the way you took that foundation brush and lined your eyes with black today. And today we are going to be talking about gaslighting, how we gaslight ourselves in the creative process. We're going to talk about polarity and how we use that polarity to drive our creative process through the lens of astrology. Thanks for tuning in. We can't wait to bring you this episode.
It's always my favorite thing to remind myself when I'm gaslighting myself around you, because we both play this gaslighting game with each other.
We do. It's what drag queens do. We've elevated it to a high art. I mean, if you're a regular person rocking around in the normal everyday world and you haven't encountered drag queens and you think it's toxic, it is. It's an art form. So
it's toxic and it's a game. Like,
of course,
there's an understanding underneath it that I don't actually hate you. I don't actually think that you should be doing these things, but the world might. And we like to point it out to each other to say, you know, that's what the world actually thinks and that's what the world actually wants from you. And I don't want that for you.
No.
But it's fun. And it doesn't sound like it should be fun. It sounds like, why are we reminding ourselves of all these stupid things that we don't want to align ourselves with? But it kind of shows where you are. Like, this is what's expected of you, but this is what you're doing, and you're staying in alignment with what you want.
Yeah.
And that reminder that other people don't want that for you can be really empowering.
Yeah. And that is the whole point of the sort of roasting. I mean, it's not really gaslighting because we're not trying to convince one another that our reality, like you can't trust your reality. That's, I mean, let's be clear, that's what gaslighting really does do. And we are playing with reality itself as drag queens. We're not really women. We're playing with the reality of the personality that is underneath that we're letting out through drag. So we're acknowledging that this comes from some place that is a reaction to society. It's a reaction to upbringing. It's a reaction to the status quo, to religiosity. I mean, for me, it's always going to be that, of course, because of that South Node Saturn Aquarius. But drag and in general is supposed to be subversive, and it's supposed to get us to stop, think about what kind of programming we're allowing ourselves to run in our creative process. So back to my original question, what are the ways that you gaslight yourself, Nikki? I noticed that Venus thing, it's just like,
What is my Venus thing doing
well,
today?
I was going to actually, what I was just getting ready to do was to project my Scorpio Venus onto you, which would have been to just avoid it altogether.
I mean, my Venus is in Cancer, so it's pretty
Yeah,
good at
you're going to
avoiding too.
sidestep it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm starting a new job, and I'm not sure. I wasn't sure. I'm a little bit more sure now. But at first, whenever you go anywhere new as a queer person, you're not sure how safe it is to be who you are. And I realized that I step into my Cancer Venus and put up a protective shell and project that in a way that is more Capricorn versus more Cancer, but it comes from the Cancerian place of, all right, I got to put this wall up. I got to make sure that I'm safe. And then I can use that as a basis to project everything else out of that.
Mm.
And it kind of is a form of gaslighting myself because I know somewhere in me that it is safe for me to go wherever I go and be who I be, because I've never actually had any negative experiences about just expressing myself as I am. But I'm still caution. I still have caution behind it. Yeah, that's something recently. I can't think of anything else I've gaslit myself for
Well,
recently.
we were doing makeup earlier today. We were the running commentary when we paint our faces together. And I ask you if you want to record this, and you're like, no, we're not recording this because of some of the stuff that comes out while we're painting our faces. Like that's, for me, I feel like that's where I burn off those self-critical tendencies, because we've said this before, how you're feeling shows up on your face when you do makeup. It just, you can't help it. If you're feeling muddy and you're not making choices, your look's gonna look muddy. And of course, good.
That's what you look like today.
Oh, thanks. Thanks. Thank you for that feedback. That's a perfect lead into what I was going to say next. Brush care is also an important part of the makeup process. And I haven't done makeup in months. We're both in transition right now. Both Nikki and I are throwing the cards to the wind, nothing to rely on. You're changing jobs and I'm changing locations in the process of selling my house. So I haven't done makeup in months.
If you would like to see us painting and talking, leave a comment. Let us know. I'd be happy to change my mind if people want to see it.
Well, what was, I mean, I'm guessing that you just weren't in the mood to
Yeah.
to banter and record, because it really does become something else when you put all this. There's the process of getting it on there and making the decisions and making the application, and it requires a level of concentration and attention on my part, because I don't have a good attention span in the first place. But once it's done, we become something else. We become some other entirely different character. And you've said this before, we don't always know who that's going to be. Cancer Venus.
So where, if somebody is more like Aries or first house, what kind of conversations would they be having with themselves around that?
The Aries polarity is going to be Libra. And that's going to be a conversation of, I need to assert my creativity. I need, people have problems with Aries. People who don't like initiation, who don't like people stepping out in front and creating something that may not have been done before, tend to have a problem with Aries. And that polarity, Aries is always out on the forefront of things, always finding new inventive ways to create, and sometimes to excess, not completing anything. And that polar opposite of that is Libra. So in that axis, we're talking about identity. We're talking about me, my identity, what I can create, how I can lead you, because I am a not responsible, I am a capable, authoritative leader. That's the very Aries house. And what balances that out is the quest for the consideration of democracy. Libra is where we have to share. So that polarity is, it's mine, it's mine. Oh, okay, I'll share it with you. So working through that energy of identity, and especially is it because it's about creativity, that particular axis. It's about creating a more democratic and just world, and how you engage your authority in order to do that. And I think at the other end of that spectrum, people who identify more in the Libra arena of those two polar axes can tend to step into people pleasing, making other people happy, or on the other end of that same spectrum, manipulating other people so they can feel peace. That out of balance pucker zone Libra energy can tend to be, I'll organize everything, now you just come and have a good time because I need to be happy, and don't tell me that's not working for you.
Don't tell me it's not working for you. Did all of these things for you. Oh, my Scorpio got really excited by that.
Uh-huh.
So moving from there into Taurus and Scorpio, Taurus and Scorpio are both really about desire. Taurus is more about desire for physical things and for comfort and for just, being able to be fixed in your surroundings, where Scorpio is more of a like physical desire. It's a desire to merge with another person, whether that be through sex, whether that be through relationship. And it's about the desire to kind of piggybacking off of Libra, because there's always a little bit of a transition between the signs and the houses. Sharing resources from another person. Libra was a little bit more about like, these are my resources, I get to share them with you. Scorpio's more like, those are your resources, you get to share them with me. So it's a desire for other people's resources, or in eighth house terms, it's obtaining other people's resources. It's inheritance. So that Scorpio and Taurus axis is a lot about finances. It's a lot about your and other people's personal resources. So finding a balance point for that might look like figuring out how to get your finances in order, might look like moving into a slightly different space of, it'd be more of a Virgo space and that's probably where I want to go because of my
I,
Virgo
well,
South
I
Node.
think I know where you want to go. Can I? It
Yes.
can also mean I am creating this, however you exist in the world, however you identify creatively, whether you're in service or whether you're making something, you have a product, you are the product. That Scorpio is, I am worth this and you're going to pay me. This is my birthright. It's the place where we claim what we're worth at the it's not really commodification. It's an energetic, emotional, like, I create an emotional experience for you, and I want you to return the favor by paying me for it. It's kind
And
of that scorpionic energy. It has to do with like professionalism. Are you're creating an environment in the world. You are an environment, and you you start. It doesn't always have to be money. It's, this sex is transactional. So we're talking about transactional relationships to our creativity.
And Taurus on the other side of that is building to worth, where Scorpio already knows their worth and they're asking for it. Taurus may know their worth. A lot of Taurans really know their worth.
Mhm.
And they still spend most of their life going through the steps to find their way to that worth. I'm coming back to our episode with Patrick, where he talked about the Hierophant, and it was on that pillar with all the steps to it and how that was related to Taurus, because Taurus, a lot like Capricorn, is building, 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 building their whole life to get that end goal of worth, what that you find in the Scorpio side of the axis.
Mhm. The Cancer Capricorn polarity is about self-parenting. It is how we nurture other people and how we nurture ourselves, and how that it's how we cultivate environments, how we cultivate physical environments and emotional environments, and the sense of belonging in Cancer. You walk into a room, you fully embody that you belong there, and that creates what's the word I'm looking for? Impact. I mean, impact is a Scorpio word. Influence. Like, Capricorn seeks influence. That's what it wants. But you don't get the influence until you really feel it within yourself. It's kind of, that polarity axis is the faker taker. Whereas Scorpio is sharing other people's resources. Capricorn energy has the ability to really co-opt other people in order to create success. And if it's not balanced with the emotional environments that is creating, it just becomes dry and hollow. It just becomes like, we say this all the time, Capricorn builds palaces that they might not be able to live in because they can't feel like they belong there. And that's really what that axis is talking about.
And just to like, I don't know, I'm just getting a hit about this. A lot of people are talking about this polarity that we talk about so much as like sister signs. I know especially one person on TikTok whose name handle I cannot remember, who's constantly talking about sister signs and how it's important to get to know your sister sign or the other side of your polarity, so you can understand both sides of your own coin. If you have Capricorn energy, Cancer energy is going to keep you balanced. So if you can't find Cancer energy outside of yourself, you get to learn how to cultivate that within yourself. And you can use your Capricorn ways of like finding and building and creating space where you can cultivate that Cancerian side of the coin too.
Absolutely. The Sagittarius Gemini is about belief. And that belief informs how we parent ourselves. So as we come around the clock, so to speak, we go from Taurus to Gemini to Cancer. Well, there's Gemini in the middle, and Gemini wants to taste everything. Gemini wants to take in and take in and take in and assimilate and reach out. It just keeps reaching out. It's like it's voracious. It's intellectually voracious, and it's also identity. It's sort of like it can, that energy out of balance can get swept up in what do people think of me, and balancing that out with Sagittarius asks us, well, what are you believing? What are your beliefs and values, and what are you putting out in the world? What are you speaking? So how in that axis, what are you taking in? What is the information that you're going and researching, and how do you put that out into the world? And how is it a reflection of what you keep looking for? So it's that, I like to think of the energy of this axis sort of as it's developing in its early stages is like hungry child, just can't, or lapdog. Just like it's always got to be fed.
Yep.
And at the higher level of that, you're feeding yourself with more evolved, more complicated, more nuanced information. And so if we're going into that Sagittarius axis too fully without honoring the relatability and the basics of it, it just gets to nobody can, it gets so ascended that nobody can relate to it. And so it's, that Sagittarius energy going can, we think of Sagittarius going off on their own and traveling and questing and seeking, but the way to balance that out is to come back to, how does it relate to your immediate environment? Is it relatable?
And it's important to remember that goes both ways.
Mm-hmm.
That if somebody is a lot of Gemini energy and they're not super comfortable with Sagittarius energy,
But I don't
don't
know
know who
anyone
that
like
could
that.
be.
I don't know anyone like that.
It just becomes very mental and very very mental, very cerebral, a lot of communication, a lot of things going on at the same time. I could tap into that Gemini.
How many
Mercury very
ways
quickly.
how many ways can you say the same simple concept again and again and again?
Exactly. And
Instead
then
of
there's
evolving the concept.
and then there's no meaning. It's all information with no backdrop. You and I speak of it in this way. I don't have access to Sagittarius, which isn't true. That's one way that we like to gaslight ourselves. Is we tell ourselves, I don't have access to that energy. We
Like
all
when
have
we're
access.
all of it, you are all the signs, you are all the houses, you are the whole thing.
But what we really mean when we say that is, I don't have any planets in Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is in my 8th house of death and release, and the other, I just said the other signification earlier, inheritance. So like things that are generally seen as uncomfortable subjects.
Because this season we've been dealing with the importance of grief as part of the creative process. We've been dealing with a lot with death, and some of our guests were literally challenged with near-death experiences, and that is where meaning gets created.
And that's literally my Sagittarius 8th house.
Mm-hmm.
The meaning for me is either it's meaningless because we're all going to die someday, or there's so much meaning because we're all going to die someday.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the literal translation. And that might be why it's harder for me to see the nuances in Sagittarius. Gemini is the speaker and Virgo is the thinker.
Mhm.
And you're used to being the thinker as opposed to the speaker. So you have a lot of curiosity about what those experiences are. And you get to experience those through me a lot. I do jump into my Gemini plenty.
Yeah, yeah, you do. I mean, I've said this to you on multiple occasions. One of the biggest reasons, aside the fact that I love doing drag with you, that I invited you into this enterprise is because of your Gemini. I wanted to find some healthy expressions of that to be modeled for me, and you do that so beautifully. So
Healthy and
thank you.
unhealthy.
Healthy and unhealthy. Speaking of healthy and unhealthy, let's talk about the Virgo Pisces axis node. So as a Virgo, I get to learn a lot from Pisces. The most challenging, difficult, traumatic, disruptive experiences that I've had in my life have come through Pisces, actual Pisces people. And every time I say, I'm never doing that again, and I keep doing it. So that polarity is about managing the tiny details and discernment and specificity with mystery and all that is and the absolute and spiritual concepts. And so we can get very mental in the Virgo part of that coin, and we can get overly emotional in the Piscean side of the coin. So that axis is about how we experience the material world and support others through that experience. So we're thinking and we're creating and we're managing and purifying and honing and refining there in the Virgo part of that arena. But if it isn't connected to emotion, if it isn't considerate of what it creates in the deeper, more in the darker, in the subconscious realm, if you're just staying in the mental realm only and you're not going into the deeper subconscious that is Piscean, then you're not balancing that axis. And as I mentioned before, all my opportunities to look at what's really in my subconscious came from Pisces. They do it really well.
Well, and you have Jupiter in Pisces, so I'm sure
I have
that
Jupiter
was
in
a little bit of
Pisces.
an access point for you too.
And I'm starting to, if my really exploring the energy of this and the embodiment of what Jupiter in Pisces really means, I am starting to, like, I used to take it really personally, these things with Pisces, but I think I trigger them because that, also if you're Pisces and you're triggered by Virgo, we want to hear about it. Like, what is the thing that triggers
Why are we
you?
triggering you?
Why are we triggering you? But I think it's because of that Jupiter and Pisces, everything's possible. Like literally at the universal connectivity level of magic, it is possible. And I have had times in my life, my mother has always said to me, you always walk out of shit wearing a new suit. And that's the Jupiter and Pisces energy. And I think that in some of the Pisces that I've dealt with in my life, they tend to be more Virgo than even I am. Like when we think of sixth house in Virgo, it's being very fastidious with your health and your physical well-being. That's Virgo. But all the Pisces that I know, they're like vegan, gluten-free. It's like they take such critical care of their physical well-being.
I think that speaks to as well how we're processing society through that too. Like that leaks a little bit back into Aquarius
Mhm.
because Piscean energy is practically the same as 12th house energy. And 12th house energy is hidden things and things that have to relate with death as well and starting a new process. And we've talked about this in previous episodes. That's not a comfortable place for a lot of people in our current Western society.
Mhm.
So it might even be more comfortable. And I can definitely say that from my Piscean North Node. It's it is more comfortable to go to that sixth house place of work and everyday routine and things that actually benefit the rest of society as opposed to benefiting the self and getting ready to move on to something new
Mhm.
because it's just more socially accepted. And I think that's a good segue to go back to talk about Aquarius and Leo a little bit.
Of course we should. We don't want to leave them out.
No. So that Aquarian place of being a rebellion or being a forefront for society or knowing the rules of society when you're going through a very Saturnian look at Aquarius and enforcing the rules of society and being in that fixed place of a like fixed Aries Saturn. Like that is, there's a lot going on. It's no wonder that it became ruled by Uranus through time because like how do you mix all of those things together? And Uranus is all about that changing things up and making things different. And how do you make Saturn, the like god of time, basically like confine itself into this airy space that's also fixed? Like that's all, that whole thing is nothing but contradictions. And it's no wonder that Aquarians are just like walking contradictions themselves
They're the
sometimes.
both and.
Yeah.
It is all about me. I am absolutely unique like everyone else. And and it's critically important that we all are free to express our uniqueness, because only then will we all be free. Like that's I think
Yep.
that Aquarian energy has an ability to see what's possible from humanity, without taking in the consideration of time. Social evolution takes so much time.
It doesn't feel like it should.
It doesn't feel like it should. Like just because we can conceive of what's possible doesn't mean that humanity is going to get behind it so quickly. And I think that we're starting to move more quickly than we have, and thanks to social media and these very Aquarian things. But I said this on a former episode. Look at how long it took for the Age of Enlightenment to come after the invention of the printing press. It literally took 300 years for education to be more widely accepted for the masses.
And at that, like, there's still a faction of humanity that is not willing to move past that. There's still a faction of humanity that's not willing to become educated. And that's kind of like the beauty of what I'm doing and changing is like I'm moving from the beauty industry into factory work, where beauty industry is all about let's serve others and let's make things beautiful and let's learn these things that we have to learn so that we can be educated so that people can trust us into okay, you're going to do the thing, go do the thing. And I am being very careful with my words because my judgmental Gemini is right there. um it's it's amazing to me that there's still so many people that are not at that level of higher um higher service to other people. And I know because I experience it from people who are coming in as customers, but now being in a space where I'm experiencing that from people that I'm potentially going to be working with. Yeah, there's a lot of people who are still very self-focused and not super concerned about the collective and the way that that Aquarian energy is. And that's not who I be, because I got Mars in Aquarius in my 10th house. Like that's very strong Aquarian. I like, and I'm sure people who are watching potentially know, like my Facebook is full of memes and a lot of fun stuff,
A
but a
lot of
lot of social
Aquarian memes.
issues.
Yeah,
A
you
lot of
post a
social
lot of social
issues.
issues. You are more Aquarian than even I am in this regard, and I think
On
that
social
it's
media.
on social media. Well, yeah, I mean, but you are also out there living it, in the world
Yeah.
in that way.
And with my Taurus, Gemini, first house, second house placements, like I think it's really fitting that I'm moving into a space where I'm going to be with people who are in those lower energies.
Mm.
Like when I did work with you before, the conversation came up a lot that, it's in my chart to be with the lower sects of humanity, the lower echelons of humanity. Not saying that not as good as people who are higher up the food chain, but people who are lower on the food chain in our society. And yeah, it just feels really fitting that that's actually starting to happen again, because that's where I've always been anyways. Before I got into education, I was in
It's
fast food.
it's I think that because that's happening for me also. We're both making this trend. I'm moving from this exquisite compound because I'm living with parents and during the pandemic, and now I'm moving in with my partner, and he has chosen to live in a very economically depressed area, and because for him it was like that's what he could afford. And because when I moved here, he was then on his own, so he's back to single income. So uh, that consideration, I'm so aware of my privilege when I go into this community, and it makes sense. Like I feel, it's hard to describe, but energetically I feel more myself when I'm there. um,
And I think it's a matter
like the
of what we're comfortable with.
groundedness, yeah, what I'm comfortable with, because there it kind of has to do with survival energy.
Yeah.
Like many of us have gotten to explore what survival energy feels like during this pandemic, and it's different for everyone. Even though I had a great place to be and to weather it out, I didn't get to work. Haven't had any personal resources of my own for quite some time because of the nature of how the pandemic played out here. And um, it feels right to me to be going into that kind of environment. Like it just energetically feels aligned. It's hard to express in words.
Yeah. And that's why I want to make it clear that I'm not in a space of judgment around any of the people that I'm about to be working with, or around any of my previous students who have been in that, survival place, because that's where I come from. Like, my family wasn't lower income, but by the time that things got split up and moved around, I was in lower income neighborhoods. I was in with lower income people a lot. And so it's something that I am comfortable with. And it's something that I understand that I'm not 100% living, but I am aware that that is still here, and that I'm stuck where I am. At the same time, like the we're really diving deep.
We
The
are
dream of social mobility isn't true anymore. I don't know if it ever was, but it certainly isn't now. I have
Mhm.
not been able to move up socially. I've not been able to move up economically. I've been stuck where I am since I was a teenager or younger. And yeah, that's not right. None of us should be stuck where we are. We should all be able to improve our
I
situation.
agree. I absolutely agree.
And this is where my Aquarian comes out, and why I understand why you said that I can be so Aquarian sometimes. Where Leo, on the other side of that, is very self-focused. Leo's still on the bottom half of the chart, so to speak. Leo's still internally processing things, but it's a fiery energy, so it's also pushing that internal processing out and saying, look at me, and look at these things that I'm processing, and look at why I'm worth what I'm doing, and look at,
Look
you
at what
know,
I'm creating with how wonderful I am. Like I'm making
exactly.
things. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk
And there's
about Leo a
nothing
little
wrong
bit,
with
because we're
that.
getting bogged down in Aquarius.
We're getting bogged down in Aquarius, and just I think that also the energy, all of the transitions that we've just come off of, and we're coming out of you just know that we're recording this right now between the holidays, between Christmas and New Year's, and um, there's a prevailing energy that comes with that for some people. So it's naturally a time when I personally look at really deep stuff. So thanks for joining us with that. On to Leo. Um,
Let's lighten it
I,
up with Leo to finish off.
well, I think it's, first of all, know that our come from with this work is that we are all of the things. We all grow and develop our creative processes and our identities and our relationships and our being and engaging in the world through stages. And that's all that astrology is doing, is describing those stages and giving us some archetypes. And they're all important to consider, and they're all it's necessary to know where we are when we're going through that self-awareness and self-development are really where power lies. So back to Leo. Leo is the first time along that creative development that think of a 5-year-old. They know how powerful they are. They know they can manipulate circumstances for their own benefit, and they know they can throw a tantrum if need be, and everything is critically important. Everything is important. Everything's right now, and that's Leo energy. It's very much about the enjoyment of life, and life is now, and the just eating it all up and being creative and using your life force to emanate and to shine in the world and have that reflected back to you. It's still in discovery because it's still down there on the lower parts. You're still discovering about the world, but you're discovering about the world through you. You bounce your personality at the world, and the world bounces it back to you. And then you can go to Virgo and apply that feedback if you so choose. But the way that balances out with Aquarius is, if you're constantly making it all about you, it's just hubris. And considering the larger collective is really important to evolve that powerful, courageous energy. Aquarius is where we are beginning to consider being philanthropists. And the Leos that I know that are really highly evolved are the biggest philanthropists. They have foundations, they contribute to society and to the arts, and they're not afraid to tell you what they're doing.
They
But
ride around California in a golden helicopter, putting out the wildfires with a bullhorn.
precisely. Leo does make it all about them, but it's really,
When they're balanced, it's also
when
about
they're
everybody
when
else.
they're balanced, it's so inclusive. It's so inspiring and generous, and these are the words that I think of with Leo. And I think we tend to get really wrapped up in envy of the fire signs in general,
But you and I especially.
But we don't have any fire. We have
Got
pretend.
North Node in Leo.
Well,
Don't
what's a
pretend you
North
don't
Node? That's
have
a thing I'm
fire.
becoming. It's not an actual tool.
Okay.
Okay. But it's easy. Okay, okay. Thank you for that opportunity to own my own experience instead of making broad sweeping generalizations. It's easy for me to get really envious of the fire signs because they just are themselves. They don't have to invent themselves. They just go out there and they are. And when there's a lot of mutability behind this, I don't always know who to be. That's why I'm a drag queen.
Is that you're not speaking loudly anymore, so I couldn't hear you.
Okay, well, I'm not sure that I really wanted you to hear what I had to say because it was false vulnerability. Thank you for joining us with AstroDivaz ASMR. We're glad that you could join us. I was thinking about the way that my axis that Aquarius Leo in the 4th, 10th, the 10th, 4th, that's Aquarius Leo and Cancer Capricorn. So I created this statement that I can cultivate the courage to include everyone in my quest for freedom and take responsibility to embody my own pronouncements. I'm reading this off of notes that I scribbled down. So there's a lot going on in that. Cultivating the courage is the Capricorn Leo conversation, and to include everyone in my quest for freedom. That's Aquarius sitting there in the 4th house.
There's a way to use any piece of your astrology if you know the sign or the house, and use those keywords that people just know about those signs or those houses, because the signs and the houses can be really deeply interconnected. So your example is Capricorn and Leo because it's a 10th house conversation, which we would normally say would be more of a Capricorn conversation, and Leo being the sign. So Capricorn loves to cultivate and create and build foundations for others and for themselves. And Leo likes to showcase and be the center of attention. And how do those things work together? How does Leo showcasing and working together work into cultivation? So if those are the words that resonate for you, it's just a matter of committing to knowing that's a part of yourself and that you can embody that. I guess for me, my North Node being in Pisces in my 11th house would be more about community for the 11th house. That's also a very Aquarian thing. And emotional intelligence from the Pisces standpoint. So I'm actually trying to move away from that a little bit because I've burnt myself out from it for the past couple of years so much. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to habitually move back into that. I've been doing it for so long. I know that there will come a point where, oh, it's time to start cultivating community in a way that improves emotional intelligence. And that will be me knowing I'm working into my North Node, my highest peak for myself. Where if I'm staying more in my South Node and I'm trying to recover, that's from a Leo standpoint. So that would be seeking acknowledgement, and or receiving acknowledgement. That's a big one for me. When I am acknowledged, I don't like to always receive it.
I was going to say there's a chasm in the seeking acknowledgement and receiving acknowledgement. And because this episode is about gaslighting, this really is one of the biggest ways as creative people in particular that we can gaslight ourselves, is to not take in the feedback that's there and own it and really embody those wonderful reflections of who we are as creative people. It's
And my South Node being in Virgo, like being in a space where I'm able to take feedback, that's stretchy as well. So South Node for me, it's a lot easier. North Node all feels stretchy. South Node, like there's a stretchy part and a comfortable part. There's a part where like I naturally go to burn off the gas and where I could actually do that in a better way. And I'm not sure everybody else has that kind of experience with North Node and South
do
Node.
you have issues with, like, when you're out there and about, with feeling like you need to sit down and be humble, not overstepping your
That's a
role?
natural state of being for me. I'm obviously when I'm in drag, not really so much, but yeah, I it's easy for me to allow others to have their experience and for me to be more of a background character. Um I like if I know it's not going to actually elevate me and my experience and everybody else's experience, I just lay low and let the things fall around me. Part of what I also want to bring to this conversation is we're in a video format, we're in a social media format. And when we brought this conversation up, we talked about our own experiences with it versus like the collective experience. And I have a personal curiosity, surprise, surprise, Gemini. Like we're talking about the collective experience. What is your personal experience? Like leave a comment down below, let us know so that we can see if we're going in the right direction with this even, or if like you're like, again, I don't have any nuance for Sagittarius. So as a Gemini, I'm very curious to know what those nuances are. So I'd love to hear from whoever's watching, listening.
And for you who are listening, how do you experience the information? This is really what we want to really land with and drive home with people, is that this is about an experience of being human and becoming more of the best human that you can be. And if you're constantly looking for answers and not doing anything with the information, how much are you really getting out of astrology other than using it as an excuse to avoid your creative process? And we don't want that for you.
We don't want that for ourselves, and we certainly don't want that for other people. So we are more than happy to be a resource.
If you're interested in finding out more about how we use astrology and creativity together, find us at AstroDivaz.com. That's DIVAZ, AstroDivaz.com, and it'll take you to all of our programming. And we do have a program called Activate Your Axis, and it is using the sun sign, the moon sign, the rising sign, and the nodes to support you in creating a personalized coaching program.
You can download that for $369.
$3.69 at AstroDivaz.com.
You can also find us on Instagram at Peterbilt Stone. There is plenty of content that's already there that you can scroll through. There's a lot of humor, a lot of dark humor, a lot of satire. We really love having fun and bringing our drag into that Instagram.
Thank you for being part of our world this season. Thank you for tuning in to the episodes that you did. We are so grateful and delighted for your presence here and for your creative expression that exists in the world. No one is you.
We really appreciate you stopping by. Hope you had a great time with us, and we'll see you next season.
Thank you. We love you. Keep it light and do the work. Whatever.